Hey everyone. Okay, so yesterday I did this video about self-expiring React component and it went great. Samantha tweeted at me to thank me for it, so she was happy. That was good. But then I have a friend who actually asked me, hey, why aren't you streaming? And I said, hey, I streamed today. And he said, oh, cool, I'll check it out. And he checked it out. He enjoyed it, but was wondering how I would use React Testing Library to test the use expiration hook. And then also Dennis was wondering about like performance implications of the fact that the self-destruct component itself is not getting removed. And he's saying, hey, why doesn't the app just remove the self-destruct component? So I thought I would address both of those. I'll address Dennis's question first. So the self-destruct component, there's really not a way, like the way that it's going to work is you're going to have at some level, there's going to be a component that says render this or render nothing. And so, yeah, we could push that all the way up into our root component app. But that like, I wouldn't want to do that for my whole app, right? That just makes no sense. So at some point, you're going to have a component that says render this or render nothing. And I feel like this self-destruct is a good place to do that. And the way that it's created here, so Dennis was specifically saying, well, what if you have like a million messages or something that you're rendering here? Wouldn't that be a performance problem to have a bunch, like a million of those components that just never are actually removed from the DOM? And yeah, I suppose it could. So you could put this self-destruct component around the million messages. So you'd have them all right here rather than having a bunch of these right there like that, right? So hopefully that makes sense. So yeah, I would just wrap everything in a single self-destruct. And then, like, if it really is some sort of performance problem, weird thing, then yeah, you could add some logic to the component to totally remove the self-destruct from being rendered at all. But anytime you have some logic that needs to exist and some state that needs to be inside of a component, that needs to live somewhere. And sure, you can put everything in your entire application, all the state, in the root app component, but that wouldn't make a whole lot of sense to me personally. So hopefully that answers your question. I think that this API is really nice. It allows you to render whatever you'd like inside of that. So let's talk about how to test this use expiration thing. Now I might actually have to pull this down locally because I think I may need to use some APIs that Code Sandbox doesn't support. But yeah, what I'm going to do to test this is first I'm going to test it acting under the assumption that the only component that needs it is this self-destruct component. Okay, so that'll be my first assumption, and then I'll test it with the assumption that use expiration is actually going to be open sourced as a library or something. So starting with that, I'm going to say selfdestruct.js, and this is going to be our self-destruct component. So I'll take all this stuff, we'll paste it in here, get rid of that React DOM nonsense and the app nonsense, and we'll export default self-destruct. Okay, cool. So then in here, we'll import self-destruct from self-destruct and get rid of all of this. And now we have a separation between the app, like our app component, and the component that we're interested in testing. So YouTube is telling me that we're having some trouble. So in the comments, let me know if you are good, but I'm going to keep on going unless somebody says we're not good. So one thing I'm going to tell you first off is when you're writing tests in Code Sandbox, you're typically going to run into some problems because Code Sandbox runs your tests and runs your app code in the same DOM, in the same iframe, which causes a world of problems for lots of things. So I think there's an issue open for that, and if somebody wants to fix that, that'd be super awesome. In fact, I just found out today that if you contribute to Code Sandbox, they give you this sweet little helmet that says that you're an open source contributor to Code Sandbox, which I think is pretty legit. I added this cool feature, or I fixed this cool feature for Genie, which basically when you do Command P, it'll or actually I think it's just on Command Shift P. It sorts your options that you like according to what you've selected before. So if I say Zen mode, then that will show up there, and it sorts it according to, like, it uses local storage to tell based off of what you typed before and what you selected what should show up first. So kind of like Alfred for the web. It's pretty cool. So anyway, so if you want to fix the problem where the tests and the app are running in the same iframe, just basically, I think all that needs to happen is put the tests running in a different iframe and everything will be hunky-dory. But because that's not the case, I'm going to say react-dom.render, look at the tests. And actually, you know what I'm going to do first before doing that is I'm going to fork this so we can keep this in a pristine state. And now we're going to use this one. So here we go. We're going to say look at the tests. We'll get rid of the app and the self-destruct. We'll just, that's all it's gonna do. Don't even need React, just React DOM. Okay, so with that set, I'm going to switch over to show the tests. The tests are breaking right now due to actually another bug in Code Sandbox where doing this does not work, which is really annoying. So I'm gonna import, here, just DOM. I forgot how to do this manually. Usage, import star, and then extend just DOM, import star as just DOM, and extend, and then get rid of that. And now my test is passing. So just has some problems. We gotta fix that. I'm not sure what the problems are, but okay, cool. So with that all squared away and set, now we can actually start testing this thing, and I'm gonna rename this to selfdestruct.js, and we'll pull in import selfdestruct from selfdestruct, and then what does our selfdestruct thing do? Well, all that we really care about is that what we pass as the children will get will be displayed to the DOM and then removed from the DOM after a certain time. So we'll say test self-destruct removes children from the DOM, DOM after a certain time. Yep, that's what we're gonna write our test as. It may not be the best name for a test, but I'm okay with that. So we're good. Okay, so from here, and actually we don't have any events to fire, so I can get rid of that. We don't need to use state. So we're got everything we need. So we're gonna say, well, we'll just say render self-destruct, and I'm gonna what is gonna be our children? We'll say children is I am here. And then we'll render children in here, and then we'll get by text, and then we can say expect get, actually what we're gonna, well, I'll show you that later. Get by text children to be in the DOM. Well, actually that's gonna be, here, we're gonna wrap this in a div. There we go. That way when we say to be in the DOM, it's actually a DOM node that we're getting. So expect that to be in the DOM. And to be in the DOM is coming from, actually that might be, yeah, there we go. To be in the DOM is coming from just DOM. So thank you, just DOM, for extending our expect. Okay, so cool. We're all set and squared away there. Now we need to, well, one thing actually is we haven't specified an expiration date, and maybe like we would want to have some validation on that to say, hey, this is a required thing, and if you don't provide it, then I'm going to break or something. But yeah, so well, let's go ahead and I'm going to skip that for now. We'll just specify an expiration date, and we'll say new date with date.now plus 100 milliseconds, I guess. So there we go. And then this is where we're going to start running into some problems. So what I want to do is I want to do the same expectation, except I'm going to say not to be in the DOM, which basically means getByText is going to return null, except when getByText can't find the thing that it's looking for, it's going to throw an error. We don't want to do that. So what we're going to do is we'll say query by text, and then we'll expect that not to be in the DOM. But we have to wait for a couple of seconds. So let's do the naive approach here. We're going to say wait, or we'll say sleep, and that'll take a time, and that'll return a new promise that has a resolve, and that has a set timeout that resolve after the time. Sweet. So that is an async timeout basically, and we'll make this async. We'll say await for a sleep of 200 milliseconds, and our test is now passing, which is great. But I have a feeling we're going to have some warnings. So let's move this over again, and we'll add a comment to make that run again, and boom. Oh, to be in the document. That's right. That's why I wasn't sure what the casing was, because I don't use that anymore. To be in the document. That's better. Okay. We're not getting the warning that I thought we would be getting. Huh, that's weird. I expected that we would be getting a particular warning about. Actually, let me make sure I've got what version we have here of things. Huh. Yeah, that's odd. We should be getting a warning for sure. Maybe I'm not getting the latest version of some of these steps. What are we at with React? Okay, so unpackage is really awesome, but recently anytime I go to unpackage.com, it just sits there forever. So I don't know what's up there, but that's a bit of a problem, I think. Yeah, and then I get a 500 server error. So that like kind of freaks me out, to be honest. I don't really depend on them, but I know a lot of people do. So yikes. Okay, so let's just make sure we're getting the latest and greatest. And I'm going to refresh here as well, just to double check ourselves, because I'm pretty sure I should be getting a console warning right now, and I am not. So yeah, that's interesting. I don't know why. Well, the reason I think I should be getting a console warning right now is because, and we'll get rid of that, because we're calling set should render inside of an asynchronous function, and React recently made it so that you have to run all that sort of stuff in an act, in React test utils act. And maybe the reason that it's working is because we're actually running these tests literally in the browser. That's probably why it's working. So let's download this, because I want to use some other APIs to show you some other ways to test this that do not run in the browser. And so let's pop that open. Anyway, where am I? Here we go. Okay. Oh, wait. There we go. Okay, and now I'm going to open up the terminal. Here we're going to get a new one. Goodness gracious. Okay, and we're going to cd into React code Sandbox, and we'll yarn that sucker and then pull up code while that's happening. And let me make sure I've got my code editor all squared away. Yeah, I was doing an egghead video. Now we're doing a live stream, so we'll swap those. I think those might be almost the same. Okay, sweet. So now we've got a yarn lock. We're good to go. We can say yarn test. That'll start up our tests in watch mode. And our tests are breaking, or we're getting that warning. So in the browser, we don't get this warning, but in Node, we will get this warning. And that is great. I do not know how to avoid this warning today with this style of testing. And this isn't our end result for our tests anyway. Dev drive just shared testingjavascript.com. That was nice. Thank you. Yay. So in the future, though, pretty soon, hopefully, I've been watching the PR and it's been getting close. But React Testing Library will implement some APIs or implement its APIs in a way that will basically make you never see this, so long as you're using React Testing Library's APIs. So anyway, we're going to get around this a different way right now, and that is, first off, I don't like using setTimeout in my tests. It makes your tests really finicky because if you're running on like a really a slow machine, then a setTimeout of 200 milliseconds versus 100 milliseconds, you're going to run into some issues where they run at the same time or something. Yeah, it's totally unreliable. So, yeah, so I don't like using setTimeouts in tests. Not a good idea. Also, it makes your test take exactly at least that long, which is also not great. So what we're going to do instead is I'm going to say right here, jest.use fake timers. And then right here, we're going to say jest.advance timers by time 100. And boom. And it's busted. We're still getting this warning. I'll show you how to get rid of that. But now with this, we can get rid of the sleep thing. And we can get rid of async. This can all be sync, which is great. So let's talk about this warning now. So the warning is basically saying, hey, anytime you run a state updater function or a dispatch or whatever, and it's not part of React's batching, that is potentially a bug. And so we want to make sure that you are aware of when those things are running and you make it part of React's batching so that all effects that run after that will run before your next line of code. So we run all of the set states in a batch, then we run all the effect callbacks, and then your code will continue. And it's something that I'm still sort of figuring out why this matters so much. But React Testing Library re-exposes that act thing that comes from React Test Utils. So we can just pull it right from React Testing Library. And then we can say act, put that advanced timers inside of an act, and save that, and we get rid of the warning. So typically, if you're running, or if your code relies on timers like setTimeout, setInterval, or setImmediate, then I recommend you use fake timers and then advanced timers by specific amount of time. I think that's the best way to go about doing that. I'm pretty sure that this is not supported in the code sandbox. Let's just see for sure. We'll paste that all. Oh, whoops, wrong file. Go back to our test. There we go. Paste that in. And no dice. So I'm actually going to rename this self-destruct with sleep, and we'll make a new one, self-destruct with jest timers.js. And we'll paste that in here so you can see both of these. And this should be passing though. What? Okay, whoops. Sleep, I want to see that. Oh, it is showing up. I just can't see it because it's over there. Oh, hasn't been transpiled yet. Yes, copy pasting a bunch of code in Code Sandbox sometimes results in sad things. There we go. Okay, so the sleep works in the browser, no warnings, and the self-destruct with jest, and also it takes longer because you're actually sleeping that amount of time. And then using jest timers is faster, and you can avoid the warnings. Let me think. There's another at least two other things that I want to mention. Like I said, in the future, you should be able to use React Testing Library APIs like wait and wait for element and you shouldn't have to use act explicitly unless you want to use the jest timers, which is what I recommend in this case anyway, in which case you're going to use this advanced timers by time. I know the natural next question is, well, why don't we just have a little utility built into React Testing Library to do this. And the reason that my answer is no is because React Testing Library does not rely directly on Jest. And so if we did something like this, then that brings Jest in as a dependency, and I don't want to do that. So so this is what you'll have to do if you want to use Jest timers, and that's fine. I look at this and I'm like, yeah, no big deal. That's kind of annoying to have act, but yeah. So one other thing that I wanted to mention though, for this test in particular, what we're doing is we're waiting for something to be removed from the document. And so what we can do in this case is, let me go here. We've got DOM testing library. Yeah, this one. This is a pull request that's currently active. Wait for element to be removed. This is going to be added soon, which is basically the opposite of wait for element, except this one will say, first, does that element exist? So it'll assert that element exists. And then second, it'll just continue to, well, it uses a mutation observer. So anytime there's a change in the DOM, it will check, does that element exist still? And it'll keep waiting until it is no longer in the DOM, and then it'll resolve the promise that it returns to you. So that would be another way to write this test, is to use wait for elements or element to be removed. And then you could just do await, wait for element to be removed, and then do by text that I am here text. And then you can do your assertion, or you wouldn't have to do your assertion, actually. That would work fine too. But anyway, so that's another way to do the test. If I were to implement this today, having all of the beautiful things that we're kind of waiting on implemented, this is probably the way that I would go. Because I feel like advanced timers by time is a pretty safe API. It doesn't rely on setTimeout. Neither does wait for element to be removed. That one is using a mutation observer, so it should always work. But this will also, your test will run faster because we won't actually have to wait for 100 milliseconds. Another thing that we could do here is we could say 10 milliseconds, and that should work for our browser-based test as well. So let me think. I feel like there was something else that I was going to mention here. I'm going to go ahead and leave the rest of the tests as exercise to the reader, or to the viewer. So I want you to write a test for the expiration date. What if I don't provide it, or what if I provide an expiration date in the past? That might be something to check right in here. And say, hey, if the expiration date is in the past, then don't set a timeout, just make it not render immediately. You might even do that outside of the use effect so that the should render initializes properly. So what actually you could do is say that, I'm going to spoil it for you. If the expiration date is less than date.now, then it should initialize to false and it shouldn't even render ever. So there's that. Yeah, unless the expiration date changes, and then you'll have to do some more logic. So yeah, give some of that some playing around. It's kind of interesting, kind of fun, and I hope that's helpful. I love that React makes this a thing. Oh, one other thing that I wanted to mention is, and I told you I was going to do this, what if we wanted to make this a library, use expiration? So if we wanted to make this use expiration itself a library, and maybe this use expiration UI as a part of it, then let's see how we would test that. So we're going to say use expirato. Yeah, okay. Use expiration.js. We're going to pull these in here, and I'm going to import use expiration UI from, and actually that'll be a named import from use expiration. And then we'll go in here, we'll export default use expiration, and export use expiration UI. Just gonna copy and paste that. I'm tired of spelling. Okay, so how would we test this in isolation? So I'm gonna add use expiration.js. And yeah, let's go ahead and we'll import use expiration from use expiration. And we'll make a function, or sorry, we'll make a test use expiration. Here, actually, lots of this is going to be pretty similar to, well, okay. Returns false or true, and then false after the expiration date. Okay, there we go. So we'll get our expiration. I'm spelling this different every time. Spell expiration. Okay, so it is an I. Expiration. Yeah, I spelled that wrong. And I spelled that wrong. And I spelled, oh, that's right. Okay, use expiration date equals a new date. That is date.now plus 10 milliseconds, so sometime in the future. And then we'll say so this would be the naive way to do this. You're like, oh, okay, I'll just use expiration. Here's my expiration date, la 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 la. And then we'll write some more tests, and then we're like, oh, wait, I can't find the module because I spell things wrong. Expiration. There we go. Use. Oh, that's right. Use expiration. And I spelled this file wrong also. So, word to the wise, do not spell things incorrectly. Okay, there we go. So, we're going to get an invariant violation. Hooks can only be called inside the body of a function component. What does that even mean? That means that you actually have to, you can't use this like this. You'd have to do function, my component, and then use expiration, and then render my component, and that is how you test it. So let's go ahead and we'll just do that, and then I'll show you a couple other utilities that you can use. We'll do render from React testing library, and because we're using JSX, we're going to need to import React from React. And great, now we can render that my component thing, and we want to get access to what's returned here. So I'm going to say let should render, and should render is going to equal use expiration. And after we do this render magic, we're going to say expect should render to be false, or true actually. Should return true and then false after the expiration date. Sweet. Okay, nothing was returned. Oh, bummer. So we're going to return null. There we go. It's got to, if you want it to be a component, it has to return a renderable thing. Null is renderable, and that's what I always use. Kind of nice. Okay, cool. So now we do actually have something that is going to happen in the future. So I'm going to opt for just use fake timers. And then down here, we already know that we need to use act. So I'm going to pull that in, and we'll say act just advance timers by time, 10 milliseconds. And then we can expect should render to be false, because my component, this runs again. So if we had this as a spy or something, we could verify that this runs twice. And here, let's just do that right here. Get rid of params. So console log, yeah. Should render. And then we can see two console logs right there. Should render undefined and should render true. That is because we put that in the wrong spot. There we go. Should render true and then should render false. So this is actually run twice, and that's thanks to the set state or the use state, where we're calling set should render inside of this use expiration, which triggers the parent component, the owning component, to be re-rendered. React will re-render it auto-magically, which is cool. Okay. Is it good practice to use setTimeout inside an effect? Yeah, UI Wizard is correct. If you need some async, something like this, I'm going to rephrase that question. Is it good practice to use the platform APIs to accomplish your goals? Yes, absolutely. It's good practice to use platform APIs. If you want to use, if you want to do things that are side effects, most of like browser interaction APIs are going to be side effects. then you are going to use those in useEffect. And UI Wizard is correct again. Just make sure to use clear timeout in the useEffect as well, which we're doing here, where we return our cleanup function, and that's where we do our clear timeout. And that way, if the component that's using this hook is unmounted, then we at least clean up after ourselves so we don't have a memory leak, which would not be fun. Memory leaks are not fun. Okay, cool. So that is how I might test this hook. Let me show you another way that we could test this. Same test, but with utils. So I'm going to copy all of this stuff and we'll refactor this. And so instead of all of this nonsense, what I'm going to do is I'm going to preface this by saying you should not be testing your custom hooks like this at all, like even like what I've shown you already. Don't test your custom hooks like this unless they are highly reusable. Our custom hook is getting a great test with this test, and we don't need to know that self-destruct works by using a hook. It could work by using a class. It could whatever. And so that all is an implementation detail. That custom hook is an implementation detail. So use expiration, that custom hook, we only really want to test this if it's like a library that we want to make sure that we are fully tested on. So testing this way works great. But if you've got a bunch of tests and you don't want to have to create a bunch of these functions and you want to do have a couple other utilities, then what I recommend for you is, I'm going to just pop open this other one, React Hooks Testing Library. This actually is great. So React Hooks Testing Library is basically, it's built on top of React Testing Library, and it allows you to test hooks using a utility called renderhook. And so here we're going to just pull that in right here. And I've already, actually, you know what? We need to take care of cleanup. So I'm going to do that cleanup thing. So the cleanup and the act are actually being just re-exported from React Testing Library. So I'm going to get rid of those, and all I really care about is the render hook. So we'll say after each, we'll clean up. Whoops, I already had that in my clipboard. And we're going to get cleanup from React Testing Library. And I'm going to need to install this. So let's say yarn add dev React Hooks Testing Library. And we'll use this renderhook utility, same test, but with renderhook. So here we'll say renderhook, and that's going to take a callback. And what that returns, for me actually, is irrelevant. So it kind of returns a ref, and then you can get ref.current.shouldRender, and then ref.current.shouldRender. I'm pretty sure that's what it is. Let's see. .current, yeah, result.current. They call it, oh, you destructure it as result. I'm not sure what it returns, honestly. Let's see. Result, re-render, oh, that's right, and unmount. Oh, that's good. So here, we'll get result, re-render, and unmount. So let's talk about each one of these in turn. Result. Actually, let's make this test pass first, and then we can talk about each one of these in turn. So with this change, we can actually get rid of all of that stuff, and we can get rid of render that hook, and this is all we're left with. So you go from this stuff where you're making a component and rendering that component down to just this, which I think is pretty reasonable. So Konstantin is saying use expiration test is an integration test, right? So this test, I'm guessing, is what they're talking about. No, this isn't. This is definitely a unit test for sure. So yeah, so Motion is saying, hey, are we guaranteed that this just advanced timers by time of 10 milliseconds is going to make sure that it will always work? Because don't use effects or use effect does not run synchronously. That is correct, and that's one of the reasons why act is so important, because what happens with act is it says, hey, I want you to do this thing, whatever's in this callback. When this callback is done, I want you to synchronously run all of the effects. That's what act does. And so, yeah. The render function from React Testing Library will, or it does use act, and so all of your effects will run synchronously after render, after re-render as well. And all of the fire event things, all of that runs within an act, so all use effects will run synchronously after those as well. So, great question. Okay, so we've got our result, and we're running that, and now we're going to run our tests to make sure that that is all passing, which it is not. Why is it not? I do not know. Should render true. Here, let's get rid of those console logs. And with render, we're going to get result, current. Here, let's see. Result. Oh, okay. So the current is actually whatever is returned. Yeah, no, that makes sense. Should render is totally irrelevant here. There we go. Okay, so result.current is whatever is returned from use expiration. Okay, sweet. So this works. I've got to get going here in just a sec. I'm going to finish up some things. So if you want to re-render your component, see what happens when, or your hook, see what happens when your hook is re-rendered. For example, basically just call this again with, I'm pretty sure that re-render, yeah, it takes new props, so new things that you want to pass to the render hook, or to use expiration, I guess. So that would be if we wanted to change the expiration date. I'm not exactly sure how that works. Here, let's see, what's this render? I'm not exactly sure what that'll do. So yeah, sorry about that. I feel like you just call use expiration. I don't know. Yeah, probably re-render is important, but I'm not sure why. But yeah, then if you wanted to unmount, so in our case, we'd want to make sure that the timeout has been cleared. And so we'd run unmount to do that. So that is handy. So one other little trick I'm going to show you, and this is probably the way I'm going to do most of mine, is one thing that I like about this is should render is always kept up to date, because we just reassign it every time right in here. And so I like that a lot. So what I'm going to do is I'll say let should render, and then we'll say should render. Here, we'll do this inside of brackets. Means we'll have to return that, but what we're going to do is we'll say should render equals use expiration, and now I actually don't need the result at all, and we can just do should render. So you can do it that way too, if that's what you want to do. So I'm going to jump out. In fact, I'll do this right now so I don't forget. We'll get these in our test here. We'll do new file, use expiration.js. We'll put all of this in here. Lots of these tests will not work in Code Sandbox, which is a travesty. Use expiration.js. Put that there, and we'll update our self-destruct thing. And yep, I think that's it. So yeah, some of these don't work. Use expiration should actually have 2 tests, so that's kind of weird that it's only showing 1. Oh no, it shows 1, but it actually has 2 tests. Here, we'll save this and refresh. I want to see which one of these are actually gonna okay. So the only one that actually is working in Code Sandbox, because it's not using APIs that aren't supported, is the self-destruct with sleep. Both of these other ones are failing because we're using, wait, what? It looks like Code Sandbox. There we go. because we're using just.use fake timers, and that throws an error because that's not supported in Code Sandbox, which is a shame. But how many of you are building applications entirely in Code Sandbox? I would probably say none. So yeah, and if you want to, like I said, you can make improvements to this because it's open source, and that's great. Okay, so this is the new one. I'm going to paste that in the chat, and I will hopefully remember to update the description for that. I hope that was helpful and instructive and interesting, and I will see you all at another time and place. I hope you have a nice day, and yeah, have fun. Bye.